Part 7. We finally get the horror matchup we've all been waiting for. You guessed right, it's Jason versus Carrie. The immovable object battles the power of telekinesis. Wait, did you think he'd be fighting someone else? What is up, everybody? We're back with my look at the Friday the 13th franchise. Today I focus my mind on Part 7, The New Blood. While Part 6, Jason Lives, was met with rare positivity from the critics, it became the lowest grossing entry up to that point. I don't think it was really because it was a bad film, but fans had felt duped after Part 5 and weren't keen on revisiting the series. But the money was still rolling in, so Paramount pushed on. This was actually their first attempt at creating a Freddy vs. Jason movie. However, the rights to A Nightmare on Elm Street were owned by New Line Cinema, and if the film was going to be made, they wanted to distribute it. Obviously, Paramount wasn't willing to give up the rights at this point in time, so they decided to keep the versus concept, but pit Jason against a different enemy. The suggestion that stuck was Jason versus Carrie. Jason would return, but have to face off against a young girl dealing with her psychic powers. The late John Carl Buechler, who was well known for his work in design and makeup effects, was hired to direct. He brought along a friend from a previous film he directed, stuntman Kane Hodder, to play the role of Jason. Kane would go on to play the character the most in the franchise and become synonymous with the role. So how did Jason's first big fight with a powerful opponent end up? Let's find out. So the movie begins and we're back to recaps. It's a mixed bag with a montage of Jason moments playing over the narration of someone thought to be Walt Gorney, the actor who played Crazy Ralph. However, that's apparently been proven false, so it's Joe Who the Hell Knows doing a good narration followed by a replay of the ending to Part 6. I can say with certainty that Part 4 did this montage recap better thanks to its overlay with Paul's campfire tale. It's fine, but then of course it has to end by showing the ending to the previous film again, which you should all know by now I just don't like. Flash many years later, and Jason is still chained to the bottom of the lake, and the Shepherd family is living in a nearby house. Young Tina is listening to her drunk, abusive father berate her mother, and she drives herself to the middle of the lake to escape. Her father begs her to come back, but she wishes death upon him and forces the dock to break using her telekinesis. Older Tina wakes up from her nightmare on her way to her old home with her mother to meet her doctor. Nothing like revisiting the place you murdered your dad to get over your trauma. You'll also notice that apparently they named the town back to Crystal Lake from Forest Green. Guess they had to rename after the murders from Part 6 and opted to just use the old one, cause who's gonna notice? The two arrive and are greeted by Dr. Cruz, who Tina clearly isn't a fan of. But then she meets Nick, a young man who's with a group of teenagers across from her place throwing a party. A family living across from a group of partying teens?
Why does that look so familiar?
Tina has her first session with Dr. Cruz, and you can tell by the way he yells and forces her to get angry, he's just trying to exploit her powers. Won't be confirmed until later, but it's quite obvious.
The only reason that I'm here is to help you overcome the guilt that you have about your father's death. That's all.
That's bullshit!
Later that night, Tina goes out to the lake after saying how much she misses her dad. The drunk, abusive dad is greatly missed for some reason. Maybe I'm just being cruel, but they treat the dad like he was the family's hero despite setting him up as a bad person. Anyways, she senses a presence in the lake she believes to be her dad, but inadvertently unlocks Jason from his watery tomb and sets him free. The look of Jason is probably my favorite thing about this movie because it is my favorite Jason design of the franchise. I love how you can see his spine and the side of his mouth with the teeth sticking out. He definitely looks like he's been rotting at the bottom of the lake for God knows how long. I applaud John Buechler for implementing his experience in makeup effects into his version of Jason.
My intention was to redesign the look of Jason specifically to reflect all the damage that had been done to him in the previous movies. I just got tired of seeing, a guy in a gray costume wearing gloves with a hockey mask walking around and there was nothing wrong with him.
and Kane Hodder. I love his dedication to the character of Jason over the years, and I think his performance in Part 7 is the best he did playing him. Many people love him and regard him to be the best Jason thanks to his many portrayals, but I can't say he's my favorite Jason.
That's my third monocle this week. I simply must stop being so horrified.
He's great, but if I'm going to be honest, I think the fan base overhypes him too much. He's in several of the worst entries in the whole series, which isn't his fault, and people say he brings this rage to Jason, but it's really just a lot of heavy breathing. Again, I love how seriously he takes the role, but he's not the best Jason to me. However, we get to see him in action right away after his resurrection. Michael and Jane are broken down on the side of the road, and Michael opts to camp in the woods, but Jane says his cousin Nick can pick them up because he's nearby for the surprise party they were having for him. While Michael is away, Jason sneaks up on Jane and kills her with a spike to her throat. Michael returns to find her dead body and is hunted down. We then get to meet the group of teens at the birthday party house. There's preppy boy Russell and his girlfriend Sandra, sci-fi weirdo Eddie, the upbeat Robin, shy nerd Maddie, stoner David, and the snobby bitch Melissa. Ladies and gentlemen, all the stereotypes are present and accounted for. This is one of, if not the worst, group of teens. There's no chance in hell in you believing any of them are actually friends. They're incredibly forgettable, except maybe Melissa, because she's really good at playing the bitch. You're more likely to remember their deaths than their names. Long story short,
but you're terrible. You're all terrible.
Nick invites Tina over to meet all the colorful characters, but she randomly has a vision of Michael being killed by Jason, and she runs back to her house where she finds a metal spike. She tells Dr. Cruz what she saw, but he believes she's seeing visions of her father and finds no metal spike in the porch, leaving Tina to think she's going crazy. Cut to random camping couple Dan and Judy. Dan goes off to fetch them some wood, but Jason gets a twofer here as he punches right through his chest and snaps his neck. Judy is all ready for Dan and her sleeping bag, but gets a visit from someone else. This is the best kill in the movie and top 10 in the franchise. Creative, cool, and darkly humorous, checks all the boxes for a great kill. The following morning, the teens discuss how Michael never showed up for his party, including Ben and Kate, the couple you're just meeting now, who are apparently fighting for some unbeknownst reason. Meanwhile, Tina and Nick are hanging by the lake, getting to know each other.
I grew up in Pittsburgh. I used to hang out with a real bad crowd. Then my dad kicked me out, and now I go to night school. Your turn.
Truly riveting character development. Tina admits that she witnessed her dad die when she was a kid, and she's visiting her doctor from the mental hospital. Little did they know they were being spied on by Melissa. When Tina goes back over to the party house, Melissa uses this chance to have Eddie help her taunt Tina.
Isn't this the way they wear their jackets back in the mental hospital?
I'll teach you to laugh at something that's funny!
Tina runs back to her house, begging to leave, but Dr. Cruz denies her request. She then runs into Nick and tells him that she thinks his cousin Michael is dead.
I don't think I'm comfortable around you anymore.
Later that night, Sandra and Russell go for a skinny dip, but are killed quicker than you can remember who they are. Now this is where we begin to blatantly see that the kills were severely cut. Part 7 is notoriously known for being the most heavily censored, no thanks to the MPAA.
Ratings board raped my movie. I equate horror to telling a joke. Everything's in the setup, and then the payoff has got to be, whoa, that's great. We were telling the joke and we weren't allowed to give them the punchline. So what you see in the final cut of Friday 7, which is not really my cut, a very watered down version of what we hoped it would be.
Let's look at Russell's death here, for example. I'll try to do this throughout. Originally, you saw the axe connect with his face, blood sprays, and he twitches on the ground. You'll come to see just how much of this film was unfortunately trimmed. Over at the party house, Maddie is giving herself a makeover after losing to Robin over who would get closer to David. Maddie, your prize would have been the annoying stoner. Don't beat yourself up. And Melissa is flirting with Eddie in order to make Nick jealous, and oh my god, I don't care. Dr. Cruz is taking a stroll through the woods and stumbles upon the dead dead body of Michael. Back at the house, Mrs. Shepard discovers that Dr. Cruz stole the spike Tina mentioned earlier, and she listens to his recordings, making it clear he's just using Tina for her powers. Cruz comes back and is confronted by Mrs. Shepard, but this causes him to threaten to send Tina back to the mental hospital. Tina overhears this and steals a car to leave, but sees a vision of Jason killing her mother, causing her to crash. Completing her touch-up work, Maddie decides to go looking for David outside for some reason. But the only guys she comes across are a dead Russell and Jason. She's chased into a random farmhouse shack and attempts to hide from Jason, but it's no use. I actually kind of like this whole scene, except I would have liked to have seen the kill. I like the little cat and mouse game going on because as best as she tries to hide, you know Jason is going to corner her. It's the closest to tense this movie gets. Jason then makes his way to Ben and Kate, who clearly have made up over whatever the hell they were mad about. He starts to shake the van, but they think it's Michael messing with them, and Ben goes looking for him. He gets a surprise head crush from behind. We only get to see a brief bit, but the actual cut was far more gruesome, showing Ben gets his head absolutely decimated. With Ben out of the way, Jason is free to use the most deadly weapon in his arsenal on Kate. Inside, Melissa admits to Eddie that she has zero interest in him and was just using him to make Nick jealous.
I've been rejected by some of the finest science fiction magazines in the continental United States.
Weird flex, but okay. Jason cuts to power, interrupting David and Robin's sex, leading David to head to the kitchen for food where he's simply stabbed. While that was going on, Melissa snuck out of the house as Eddie unwrapped Michael's birthday gifts. Jason doesn't take kindly to those that steal presents. Another quick cut before we see the actual kill. Finally, Robin goes looking for Maddie and David upstairs. She does manage to find David, or at least part of him. Okay, so 90% of the horrible people are all out of the way. During all these deaths, Tina, Nick, Mrs. Shepard, and Dr. Cruz have been running around the woods. Tina and Nick found Michael's dead body and ran back to the house, but Mrs. Shepard and Dr. Cruz aren't there because they're out in the woods looking for Tina. Nick and Tina discover that Dr. Cruz has been hiding stuff from her, including newspaper clippings of Jason. Dr. Cruz ends up running into Jason, but uses Mrs. Shepard as a meat shield to protect himself. I genuinely feel bad that Tina's mom is killed because she's one of the few decent human beings and makes me hate Dr. Cruz with a fiery passion. At Tina's place, Nick tells her to stay put while he goes over to the party house, but all he finds are his dead pals. Rushing out, he doesn't find Tina, but Melissa. She snuck into the house and Tina ignored Nick's advice and went back to the woods. She finds Dr. Cruz covered in blood and ditches him. Luckily, Jason shows up with a buzzsaw weed whacker and kills Cruz. Ugh, this is such a weak kill for a shit character with such a quick cut. The uncensored death showing so much more would have been far more fitting for this dickhead. After finding her poor mother dead, Tina spots Jason in the woods and decides to chase him. Kinda neat to see the protagonist go after Jason for once. They meet in the middle of the road and the showdown finally begins. She trips him up and electrocutes him, but I guess she didn't see the last movie where electricity made Jason stronger. Tina runs into the party house, but Jason easily crashes in. She has to throw couches, a decapitated head, and an entire roof at Jason before he goes down. Of course, he's not dead, as we come to find out when Melissa tries to leave Tina's house. Fleeing upstairs, Tina and Nick are cornered, but she uses her powers not to knock Jason down the stairs, but through them. During their escape, Jason breaks through the wall and attempts to kill Nick, but Tina tightens Jason's mask so that it rips in half, revealing his face.
Ugly motherfucker.
She strings him up and drops him into the basement, but he drags her down too. Her only option is to douse Jason in gasoline and light him on fire. Her and Nick rush out as the house begins to burn. That's good. I mean, you wouldn't want to... Christ! Did the Shepherds have dynamite hidden in the house? You'd think that'd be enough to stop Jason, but shocker, he shows up on the dock and it looks like it's all over for Tina and Nick. But Tina throws all her power back into the lake again and resurrects her father. I guess the police never came to collect his body, and he looks well for rotting in a lake for like 10 years. But Jason has been sealed once again to the bottom of Crystal Lake as Tina and Nick are taken away in an ambulance the following morning. Boring! My overall thoughts on the movie? It's a rough one. I don't hate it as much as some of the upcoming entries, but this is honestly the first one I don't look on with much positivity. Jason's design is damn cool with all the damage you can see, and I really like the face reveal. It's probably my favorite looking Jason, and Kane Hodder does a great job. The final fight with Tina is also fun to watch since we get to see Jason take a beating for once. But other than that, it's awfully boring. I couldn't give two shits about any of the characters not named Tina thanks to their unimpressionable personalities. They're walking stereotypes that are just marching to their deaths. Speaking of which, the kills are painfully weak. The sleeping bag smash is great, but everything else is watered down and cut too abruptly. I realize that this is the fault of the MPAA, and if John Buechler could have had it his way, we would have seen some gruesome kills. It's a shame we'll never get a director's cut since most of the footage has been lost forever. But even if the uncut kills were included, I'm not sure it would have saved this movie. Its pace is really slow and seems to take forever to get to anything worthwhile. I remember talking about how part 3 is slow for good chunks, but the kills were awesome and I didn't hate the cast for the most part. Part 7 feels like I'm watching a goddamn soap opera with all the drama happening at the party house with the teens fighting over each other. And we're really getting into the fantastical stuff with telekinesis thrown in. Yes, I know we're dealing with a resurrected serial killer, so they have to throw in something new to shake things up. It is odd, but I'll admit it helps make the climax much more entertaining. And Tina is a good final girl. She puts up an amazing fight against one of the toughest Jasons we've seen, and I feel bad that she's constantly being harassed, whether it's Dr. Cruz or Melissa. I root for her to overcome all these obstacles. So while I like the main character, the look of Jason, and the final battle, this can be a bit of a snooze fest with totally shit side characters, butchered death scenes, elements basically stolen from previous films, and just an overall slow pace. I give Friday the 13th Part 7 The New Blood 2 sleeping bags out of 5. But what are your thoughts? Do you disagree and see this as one of your favorite entries? Are you bothered by the trimmed death scenes or don't you mind? What are your thoughts on Kane Hodder's Jason? And what was your favorite kill? Next week, I'll be back with my look at Friday the 13th Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan. Uh-oh. Until next time, peace.